little late in starting, it's all Danny's fault. But then we'll leave it at that for this one today. It's just inside joke. Okay, call meeting to order and approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Richard, seconded. Any additions?
Yes, 10A, I have a financial request, so I'd like to have it,
Okay.
guess it'd be under 10A.
10B.
Please.
10B.
10B? Okay. All those in?
Anything else to add to the agenda? Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, by signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Never mind name, motion carried. Any conflicts of interest to declare? None? Hearing none. We'll proceed with the presentation of the audited financial statements, and I invite Gloria Banks from Thornton to come up front and, I say up front or to the podium and do the presentation if you would like.
You can go ahead, Gloria.
So we do
Oh,
we do the,
It's okay.
we do the consolidated first.
We'll do the consolidated first, yeah.
Thank you very much. So I handed out two documents. One is the non-consolidated and one is the consolidated. So I'm going to go over the consolidated one and Alan will go over the non-consolidated later on. And so the consolidated financial statements are the required audit statements that you have to do for reporting purposes. The non-consolidated are more for your internal purposes because they mirror what you would have set in terms of your budget, and you can see each individual fund in your non-consolidated statements. So in terms of the consolidated financial statements, they do include all of the operations of the municipality of Argyle, which include the operating fund, the capital fund, and your reserves as well. But then they also bring in your share of the operations of the Yarmouth Area Industrial Commission, Yarmouth International Airport Corporation, the Yarmouth County Solid Waste Management Authority, and YASTA. So you have a proportionate share in each one of those organizations because you have shared control with the other two municipal organizations. So those are included in your operations in here as well. And so we did meet with your audit committee on September 25th, and we went over the statements in detail. So I'm just going to give you a high-level overview, but please feel free to ask questions if you like. And we are a little bit later this year than we would normally be in getting your statements done. We were waiting for one of your subsidiaries, we call them, the Airport Corporation. We were waiting for their financial statements to be finalized because they were waiting on the agreement to be signed. So that delayed us a little bit in being able to release your statements this year. So I'm going to go to page 1, which is the independent auditor's report. So this is our opinion on your financial statements. The presentation is a little bit different than in prior years, so I will go over it a little bit. So the first thing you'll see is our audit opinion, and in the past you would have seen that was the last item in our audit report, so they pulled it to the front so that we can make sure that we make the statement right up front that these are a clean set of financial statements. We didn't find anything while we did our audit that would cause us to have to make a modification in the wording of our audit report. And so they are the financial statements for March 31st, 2019. In terms of the basis for opinion paragraph, we have to follow Canadian generally accepted auditing standards when we do our audits, and that means that we implement a similar procedure on all of our organizations, regardless of the size of that organization, so that you can trust that we do consistent audit approaches in all of our organizations. In terms of the responsibility of management for these financial statements and those charged with governance, which is you and your audit committee, management's responsible for making sure that they prepare these financial statements in accordance with public sector accounting standards, which is the audit framework that you fall under. As well, they're responsible for designing a system of internal controls so that the financial data can be accumulated throughout the year, with the purpose being that your financial statements would be free of what we call material misstatements. So what's kind of new here is that also it has been required that management has to make an assessment on the ability of the organization to be a going concern into the future. So we always would have assumed that, and we would have had those discussions in the past, but now it's written in our actual audit report to you that management has also made that assessment. And then we also say that those charged with governance are responsible for overseeing the municipality's operating processes when it comes to the financial reporting processes. So that's new as well. On page 2, so these are us, auditors, our responsibilities in terms of your audit. So our main objective is to make sure that your financial statements are free of material misstatement. And we do that and we obtain assurance, what we call reasonable assurance, which is a high level of assurance, but it's not a guarantee. And so we now come out and say that in our financial report, that it's not a guarantee that there couldn't be a material error in your financial statements. And that usually arises when there could be fraud in an organization. And so it needed to be pointed out that we don't look at every transaction. I know a lot of people think that when an audit is done, we've looked at everything and it's fine. But all of our audit procedures are done on a sample basis so that we make sure that we're covering the dollar value that we want to, as well as the volume of transactions. But we couldn't possibly look at every transaction or we would be here year round. And so we also use what we call professional skepticism when we're looking at items, when we're asking questions. We're making sure that we double check the answers that we get back as part of our processes as well. So in terms of what we do, we identify and assess the risk of material misstatement. So we are going to spend the most of our audit work in the areas where there's a highest risk that there could be an error in your financial statements, because that's what we're looking for. So if there's an error, we want to find it, we want to be able to correct it. We have to obtain an understanding of your internal control systems. We don't audit them, but we have to understand how they work so that we know that the financial data has been properly accumulated. We also evaluate all of your accounting policies to make sure they're in compliance with the public sector accounting standards and that you're actually applying them on a consistent basis as well. We also have to make a conclusion on management's assessment of that going concern that I mentioned earlier. We also have to conclude that that would be appropriate. We evaluate the overall presentation of your financial statements, and then we also have to make sure that because you bring in the share of those other operations, that those have been properly audited as well, and we have enough information in our audit to be able to conclude on that. So those are the items that we go through, and they are dated today, which is the day that we hope that council will approve the statements. So that's our audit report. Page 3, under public sector accounting standards, it's a requirement that internally management takes responsibility in writing for these financial statements. And so you can see it's signed by your warden and your CAO. I won't go over it, but it basically shows that they take responsibility for the financial information that follows. Okay. So page 4, it's called the Consolidated Statement of Operations. So these are your revenues and expenditures. You can see the budget for 2019, the actual for 2019, and the actual for 2018. So what I'll do is I'll just highlight the things that are different from the prior year to be able to give you some explanation. So your original budget for revenue was set at $8,298,000, pardon me, and $44, and you came in at $7,694,249. So you are lower than your budget. And the biggest item that changed from when you originally set your budget was you had planned to spend or to receive funds to the tune of $1,395,281 in what we call conditional transfers. And that was because you planned to have started your new building during this fiscal period, but it got delayed. So you didn't receive the money to spend it, so therefore that's why you're under budget in that category. And that's the biggest change from your budget to your actual. But if we compare it to the prior year, your total revenue was $8,890,760. So you're down about almost $1.2 million from the prior year. The largest item that changed was, if you recall, in 2018 was the year that the Dominion Textiles building was torn down, and their operations are inside the Area Industrial Commission, which is an organization that you consolidate as part of your operations. So you would have had revenue of almost $1 million that would have related to that, that building being torn down. So that's the largest reason for the changes in terms of your revenue from the prior year. But also, there were some things, if we look at the line that's called special assessments, and it's not a large change, but it is a bit of a change. Last year was $186,000. So last year would have been the year that where you had done your capital assessment for the sewer. So people would have made their capital payments for the sewer that was started last year. That's the Wedgeport sewer. And also last year, so also in that conditional provincial governments and transfers is your gas tax money as well. So as you spend your gas tax money on particular projects, it's brought into revenue. And so last year you would have spent more related to that project than you had this year. There wasn't a lot of gas tax money that was actually used during the year. So those are the revenues. In terms of the expenditures, you had originally set your budget at $7,242,792. You came in at $7,107,576. So you're about $135,000 lower than your budget, which is, you try to get as close as you can on $7 million. $100,000 isn't really a big number. But if you compare it to the prior year, your expenses were $9,034,434. And again, the offset to that is the same idea, is in the demolition costs related to the Industrial Commission tearing down the Dontex building. So the revenue you would have got would have been about $1 million, and then the cost would have been almost $2 million. So that's where we see the big increase that's come in your bottom line surplus for this year. Some of the other smaller items, if you look in transportation services, you'll see that the expenses are down from the prior year. So at the airport last year, there were significant costs for repairs to the runway when they were trying to maintain the larger surface, and some obligations that they had to have fulfilled there. So their expenses were down quite a bit this year compared to the prior year. And also you can see, just in terms of one that's a little bit higher, your general government services is a little bit higher this year than it was last year. So you did have the costs associated with the UARB hearing with regards to the sea cucumber facility. So those are some of the larger changes from year to year in your revenues and expenses. So at the end of the day, your annual budget surplus was set to be about $1,055,000, and about $1 million of that would have been for the building that you had planned to get started on. So you ended up this year at $586,673, and last year was a small loss of $143,674. You also have what we call a gain on disposal of tangible capital assets, so that $80,000, that also relates to the Area Industrial Commission, because after the building was torn down, then they had pieces of land which they sold, and the land was on the books for a very small amount, and they sold it for a decent amount, and this is your share of that gain. So at the end of the day, your annual surplus for the year is $667,063. And if we add that to the accumulated surplus at the beginning of the year, which was $20,064,966, you have a total accumulated surplus of $20,732,029. And so if we turn over to the next page, page 5, you'll see that same number on the very bottom. They have to agree from one place to the other. So this is called your consolidated statement of financial position. So these are your assets and your liabilities. And you can see that your financial assets, which are those that are readily convertible to cash, are at the top. And your non-financial assets, all your building equipment, all those items that you buy and to enable you to provide services to your residents, those are all below the line because you're not going to sell them to generate cash to pay off your liabilities. So that's why it's segregated that way. So you can see that your financial assets at the top, this year they're $9,974,541. So they're fairly consistent year to year. There aren't any real big swings. You have your cash, which is invested for your reserves, as well as your operating cash, and you have a small amount of restricted cash, which would be the amounts that are in your tax sale surplus account, which have to be held for a number of years. And then you can see that your receivables are coming down as the collections are being made on them. So those are really the two larger items that are included in your financial assets. In terms of your financial liabilities, this year they're $2,931,456. Last year they were $3,383,466. So they're down about $450,000 over the prior year. And that's because you're paying them off, obviously. But your long-term debt, which is the last item in the financial liability section, so $376,000 is all you have left in long-term debt. So your long-term debt here is very, very small in comparison to many of the other municipalities. And that will actually be paid out in 2022, probably in time to get some more. 2021? Well, fiscal 2022, though. Right. Mm-hmm. And then the other really large item is what we call deferred revenue, is $1,565,007. And so that's the gas tax money that you've received to date that you haven't spent. So we match your gas tax money with the future projects that you're going to do. And so if you haven't spent it by the end of the year, we set it aside. And then when you do that project, then it comes into revenue at that time. So you have a net financial asset position of $7,043,085. That means you have significantly more financial assets than you have financial liabilities, and it did grow by $438,000 over the prior year. In terms of your non-financial assets, again, that's the buildings and all the equipment and everything you have to provide your services. The net book value of those is $13,665,392. That's net book value because they're depreciated over time. You originally spent $22 million on all of the capital that you have purchased over time. And during fiscal 2019, you spent about $800,000 on new capital items. So at the end of the day, again, your accumulated surplus is $20,732,029. Again, $13 million of that is invested in the assets that you own to provide your services. So those are the two most important pages. Page 6 and page 7 are continuities of two of the balances that are on your statement of financial position, and that is your net financial asset position. And it did grow by the $438,000 you see on page 6. So you can see how it starts off with your annual surplus. So any year that you start with an annual surplus and you don't have significant capital additions, your net financial asset position is going to grow. So you'll see in comparison to last year, you spent $1.4 million in capital last year, and you only spent $791,000 this year. So that's one of the reasons why you have more net asset this year. On page 7, you grew your cash, not cash dollars in over there in the office, but cash in the bank by $94,240. So that means you generated more cash than you spent during this year. So the remainder are the notes and the accompanying schedules that go with the information that we've already looked at. You didn't have any changes in your own internal accounting policies during the year. And there was only one new section that came out from the public sector accounting standards that you had to adopt this year, and it was regarding, it's called restructuring transactions. So it didn't have any impact on your financial statements for this year. However, it sets the stage for the future. So you'll know that we've had lots of amalgamations in Nova Scotia over the last few years, and there was not a handbook section that dealt with how do you do the accounting for when you have two municipalities that you combine together. And so now there's a section in your handbook which specifically identifies how the accounting is done if you were to go under an amalgamation sometime in the future. So there is guidance now for that. So again, it didn't affect this year because you don't have any of those transactions. And so the rest are the supporting notes and disclosures. So that's the high level of the consolidated. I don't know if you had any questions or.
Okay, anybody have any questions on the Gloria?
Then I'd just like to say thank you. Your staff are very helpful while we're here doing the audit. It's not much fun to be audited, and we're here for a couple of weeks and constantly asking questions and asking them to find documentation for us. And they were very helpful. They were able to find everything that we needed as well. So I want to thank them for their time.
I have a question, Gloria. Did you find any adjustments? You had to do a bunch of adjustments. How were they? How were those? Were we out of whack compared to other years?
Yeah, no, you're in line with in the prior years. I think we had 3 journal entries this year. It was very small. And those were things usually that, we found together that we wanted to make adjustments for that maybe happened after the year end was processed. But there was nothing significant that caused us any concern about those journal entries.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else they'd like to?
Do you need a motion to adopt the consolidated financial?
We do.
We do.
Also move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. By name, motion carried. Thank you, Gloria.
So then I have the non-consolidated that I will literally take 5 minutes,
Okay.
if you'll permit me.
Sure. I will, where?
And it doesn't require approval because it's, well, I mean, you can accept it, but it's not the audited. The
Okay.
only audited statement is the consolidated statement.
Consolidated ones, yes.
So, which includes all your
Sure.
subsidiaries.
Go ahead, Alain, yes.
Okay, so, I'm on page 2 of the non-consolidated
Page 2?
financial statement. I know I'm at risk of saturation of numbers, so I'll try to keep it qualitative rather than quantitative. The consolidated
Well,
is always
She just
more,
showed you how to do it, right?
pardon me?
She just showed you how to
She
do
did,
it.
she did. She did, I got a lot to learn from our auditors, that's for sure. So basically, the non-consolidated is, it does not include any of the subsidiary companies. So this is more in line to this, to the financials that you would see on a regular basis. Now, and I say this every year, the non-consolidated operating fund statement shows the funding to and from your reserves as revenue and expenses. But as you know, you're only moving money from one pocket to another pocket. So the consolidated puts it all in one pocket, so it's one pocket, people. But then it also confuses you by saying, well, there's all, you know, there's the airport and then there's other things that we do. So it confuses the issue a little bit, but it is an accurate picture of what we own and what we are responsible for.
No.
The non-consolidated basically says, okay, most of this is operations, right? Most of this is what you see every day. So on page 2, you'll see the operating financial statement. I'm not going line by line, you've seen this a million times, but I will talk about 4 or 5 things on this paper. So on page 2, you will see we budgeted an annual surplus of $98,450. That came in actually at $364,714. Then you'll see the line below that, transfers to own reserves. We budgeted that equal amount, so that brings us to a 0. So that's why our budget balances every year. Why do I mention those two numbers? The first number, the top line number, is what your tax revenue generates when you deliver your services. So you've delivered your operational services, but you haven't saved for the future, or you haven't brought in any money from the other funds. So that's what that 98,000 represents. And that's your budgeted amount. So what you said was, we're going to spend actually more than 98, but we're also gonna bring in some amount from the reserve. That's what that 98,000 means. It's netting the two numbers in from the operating reserve out to the capital reserve. So every year you budget between 125 and 140 or $150,000 that goes in your capital reserve, and that's to plan for the future. That number is embedded in that 98, okay? The second one, okay?
Yes.
And so in actuality, what happened was you transferred 238, a net 238,000 to various funds, okay?
Yeah.
You transferred 127 from here to your capital fund to pay down the debt for the West Pubnico sewer. So the debt isn't shown in the same fund. So in order for us to show that you've paid it, it has to come out of one fund and into another. So that's 127,000 every year until November 2021. The second amount is your transfer to your capital reserve, which we budgeted 140, I believe, and what we actually sent, 175, and what we actually sent was 210. Okay, so that's more than one purpose why we transferred it to the capital reserve. And if you recall, you would have passed a motion in April or even May that authorized an additional transfer after we had an idea where we stood at the end of the year. So at the end of the day, even when we made those transfers, we were left with 126,221, which is that bottom number that you see. And so that would have been after we transferred all the money and we did what we did, we still had 126,000 to deal with. And so that went to the operating reserve. And we have to send that surplus to the operating reserve. And if there's a deficit, we have to take it from the operating reserve. That's what the regulations require us to do. So while there is a surplus this year and there was a surplus last year, very similar amount, some of that number is influenced by increases to our capital reserves. So there are transfers that influence that bottom line.
Yeah.
Okay? So just very quickly, revenues are about 88,000 better than we thought it would be, and expenses were 179,000 better than we thought it would be. A variety of reasons why. For revenue, it's all over the map. There's increased sewer levy that we didn't budget for, interest revenue that was higher, services that we delivered to airport that were more than we expected. So there's a combination of factors that brings you to 88. Same thing with the expenses, most of the savings of the 179 came from the West Pubnico sewer, where we expected to do something of a fairly large nature and we did not actually do it. So that amounts to about 75,000 of your 179. And then you had savings in protective services of 40,000, part of which was an over budget, and savings in buildings in the Public Works Department. Administration was 25,000 less than expected, and recreation was 20,000 less than expected. So again, it's in various departments. So most of which, most of which we would have described multiple times through the year.
So really, Anna, at the end of the day, just to throw something in here, that 364, 714, that's our actual surplus for the year.
That would be,
Once you deduct what we put into,
once you collect all your,
Yeah.
once you record all your revenues for taxes,
yeah,
once you record all of your revenues and you deliver all of the operating services, that's what you were left with this year.
okay, yeah,
And then, but you inside of your budget, you expected to transfer some to reserve, that's part of your budget.
that's right.
But if you're looking strictly at the delivery of non-capital
Yes, that's
services,
what I mean.
you are right. That's the starting point.
That's a starting point.
And then
You work from there.
you work from there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
So the only two other things, unless there were other questions, there are only two other things that I would mention that, page 12, I'm not gonna go through the balance sheet in any, detail, only that, there's not huge changes from year to year. But if you go to page 12, this is something you don't see all the time, and it is the capital reserve balance sheet. So oftentimes, I think your residents ask you the question, how much money do you have in the bank, right? Well, I mean, it's, how I would like to answer that is, well, it's not so much what's in the bank, it's what we have available. So sometimes we have payables that we still owe, but that the bank is higher than what, right? So it's actually about your net surplus position, not necessarily only your bank position. So when people say, how much you got set aside? Well, you have two places where you can go. This is one place of the two. So if you see on page 12, you will see capital reserve, 3384820.
Yeah,
That is your accumulated surplus for the capital reserve.
yeah,
And keep in mind, the capital reserves includes two funds. It includes your gas tax funds and includes your regular capital reserve fund. So it's not just one pot, there's actually two pots in one. If you want to know how much gas tax you have available, it is essentially the number above it, 1272651. So that number is included in your bank account, and that is money that is yet to be spent on capital projects that relate to gas tax. So and then if you look at 2018, what you'll find is the number was slightly higher last year. So we spent a little bit more than we received this year. And then I would note page 14, which is your operating reserve balance sheet. Not all of your available cash is in your operating reserve, but all of your surplus is. Okay? So when we look at this number, the bottom number on that page 14, it says balance at the end of the year, 3.212531. 3,212,531. That represents your equity position for all operations, your reserve, as well as your operating fund. They're both combined in that number. So if somebody asks the question, how much equity do you have, excluding your subsidiaries and all these other things that we're invested in, it's 3.384 in the capital reserve and 3.212 in operations. So if you add those numbers together, that would be about 6 almost 6 million. And that's up slightly from last year because we would have transferred the amount that we overspent, the amount that we spent in excess of what we received in the capital reserve, we earned it in the operations through surplus. So that wasn't 5 minutes, but I think it was like 7.
That's very good.
So and that's
You
the
are
extent.
learning from Gloria.
Yes, yes. And Gloria did it much more efficient because she had far more complicated things to talk about. So that would be the extent of the non-consolidated. I think you can probably make a motion to accept this non-con statement, which is useful for us, but it's not an audited statement, but the motion is useful for us.
I will, so move.
I'll second that.
And seconded. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Am I right, nay? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We will. We will. Before we move on,
Yes.
we had an excellent year with Grant Thornton this year. They had really great, they did really great work. And so they often are complimentary of the way that we do work for them, but we should be equally complimentary of the way that they handle the audit and the questions, et cetera. It's been very, very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. That's good, you too. Okay, we'll move on to the next portion of the meeting. The adoption of the minutes. We got adoption of special council meeting, October the 1st, 2019. Have a mover?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, my name, motion carried. We have the regular council meeting, October the 8th.
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary, my name, motion carried. Next on the item, we have business arising from the minutes, the hospitality policy.
The second reading?
It could be approved, however, it's been changed since the
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
time that we read through it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, very good.
yes, we decided to keep that a mystery. Like to keep you on your toes.
Yeah.
Well, you won.
I believe the section, and I think Lori can help me faster than I can probably find it. Just looking at the section that was changed, was there any change, actually? Right, that's correct. I'm thinking of another policy, my apologies. There hasn't been a change since the first time.
Okay.
You
You
did
won.
win.
You did win.
So Donaldson won.
One.
So we'll make a motion to accept this policy?
I mean, if that is a motion, then I won't
Well, we
speak on
talked
it.
about it during the first reading, and
We did.
nobody come up with any changes, so.
Nobody suggested any changes, so the only changes that we would bring to your attention are the ones that you wish to discuss tonight.
I thought there was one regarding the alcohol.
Alcohol, yeah. Was gonna bring that up,
But-
that we did.
There,
We didn't say we were gonna change it, you were going
there was
to
discussion,
discussion on it.
and
I see it's still there.
yes, okay. So what happened was, at the last meeting, there was discussion on whether alcohol should be included for any reason whatsoever. The commitment that we had, and which I can report on, is that we went out to ask our neighbors. We didn't
Yes.
get the answers from all of our neighbors. Some don't have a hospitality policy
Yep.
passed as of yet. Most of the feedback we received was that they were considering the wording as is, which is from the model AMA policy. If this council wishes to increase the difficulty of obtaining or buying alcohol for a particular purpose, it is entirely in your control to do that. So there was no hard changes made by any of our neighbors, if in fact they had one at all.
If I had brought it up, serving of alcohol, and we had some counselors that said, most of the time, alcohol is for sale, and as far as us serving the public or whatever, we generally don't, but there is a provision in there if we went out and had, in my wording, if we went out and we had permission, I guess it says in here we should have prior approval, before, so I guess if, I can live with that, certainly made the, questioned it a bit, but I guess I'm happy with that if we have to get prior approval.
I understand where you're coming from, and I know where you're coming from, but I think about the events that we've had.
Yeah,
I don't remember us ever
giving.
buying,
Yeah.
providing
Yeah.
alcohol, and that's been, 7 years or so. But we won't always be at this table,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
Counselors will change.
Yeah.
But I feel like it is clear there that it's not just CAO Muse deciding, well, I think we'll have some alcohol at that
Yeah.
event. Like, it does have to be
Yeah.
pre-approved, so I feel comfortable with
Yeah.
the wording of it as it is,
And-
just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councillor Albright, yes.
And I believe it was discussed the last time we talked about it, for an example, if the Governor General was coming and he
Right.
was gonna have wine and cheese,
Mhm.
I mean, you'd pre-approve that.
Right.
But you're not gonna charge the Governor General for a glass of wine while he's here,
Right.
so.
Great point, great point.
The policy also makes it clear that we are not to purchase alcoholic beverages, certainly with any municipal funds. It's not just staff, it's not just council, it's staff, right? So we actually insist on receiving the details of invoices, even when we, most times it's not an issue because you're just reimbursing people a set reimbursement, as our policy
right.
does not allow us a full reimbursement. But when we buy meals for other people, we would expect to be entirely recovered our expense for that purpose, whether we bring in consultants, et cetera. So we will not be reimbursing any staff member for alcoholic beverages. That will be a denied expense.
Very
So,
good.
so we're,
Yeah.
that's also included in
Included in
this.
there.
Yeah.
Great. That covers what I had.
It's, another thing too is, and Councillor Donaldson said, if we were to bring, if we had some kind of a meeting with, I don't know, the Governor General or whatever, and we went for a meal, and there was a drink bar. I thought I'd seen that in here, but I can't seem to find it, that if you were to take someone out for supper or whatever, someone, like Minister of Highways or Minister of Municipal Affairs or whatever, and there was a drink bar, I thought I'd seen where, with the permission, that we could cover something like that.
Yes, with prior
With
authorization.
prior, right.
So the reality of the situation is, nobody other than politicians around this table would be meeting in a private meeting with a minister.
This is
Right.
what I mean.
Protocol is that it would be typically would be the warden or the deputy warden or their designate. So
Yes.
we're not really permitted to do that work on your behalf without you present.
Right.
So this would happen a mile away,
Yeah.
and we would have prior authorization a mile before that
Exactly.
happens.
Before that happens.
That's the practical application of this.
Okay. Yep.
Need a seconder.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, has it?
No, it hasn't.
I'll
been.
second it.
No,
I'll second it.
yep. Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Remind nay, motion carried. Next on the agenda, we have the financial statements, September 30th, 2019, quarterly, and do I believe it would be Marcia that, yep,
So as you are all aware, we're in the process of changing the way that we'll be presenting the municipality's financials. We're looking into a quarterly presentation, including all the funds and in more detail. So in transition, this month, we have attached a qualitative summary along with the monthly financial report to the agenda, giving everyone a chance to read it in advance. This summary is showing a surplus of $100,319 at the end of September, with explanation on some of the larger variances between the budget and the actual, with a few projections as well. I won't read it again here tonight, however, we do welcome any questions or comments that you may have, or if there's anything that you want to specifically go over, we'd be happy to do that in greater detail if you'd like. If there's any questions.
any questions on the financial statement?
Just looks like the deed transfer taxes are back up. Am I reading this right?
Yep, they are.
Something you always point out, the,
Yeah.
gotta hit you.
That's right. Rubbing off, huh?
You concentrate too much.
Yeah, that's what's going on. Anything that you could highlight, Marcia? You don't, there's nothing there that you see that's out of whack or out of, it's going pretty well on too.
No, not necessarily anything in greater detail, other than, like Richard said, the deed transfer tax, which is
That's
one that
always-
reoccurs quite often. Last year, due to past trends, we ended up increasing the budget, and then we came out under budget, so we kind of decreased the budget again this year, and so far it's coming out pretty good. The only thing I would really say is, the revenues, you're gonna see a budgeted amount under the transfer to West Pubnico Sewer, the wastewater, that one's actually zero. That was the amount that we're gonna transfer for the storage shed at the West Pubnico Sewer for our dewatering truck. The truck, as you all know, is not working as planned, therefore is under repair, so that project will not happen this year. But you'll also see a significant decrease in the expense on that side as well, is to offset that.
We're almost, 6 months into the,
We are 6 months into it,
that
yep.
100,000 looking pretty healthy, but there's stuff probably that could come out towards the end of the year too, or the middle of the year, that
Yep.
could change that position, but anyhow, yeah. Any other questions, or anybody have? Would we, like to have a motion on that? It would be all right, I think,
I move
to approve the
I move to accept-
financial.
To accept it,
Consent,
Yeah.
yes.
yes,
Could I have a mover?
yes.
Moved by Kathy,
Second.
seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary by nay, motion carried. Thank you, Marcia. Next, strategic priority topics. We don't have anything there, but that's just on our agenda, so we can, if something does come up, we have it. For decision, 2020 E-Voting Municipal Elections. Mr. CAO, would you have anything on
Yes.
that?
There's no attachment there. The
Right.
reason why we raise it now is and there's no decision that's required today. It is, yes, it's under for decision, but rather than do up a report in detail asking what you would like to do in the upcoming election, I just wanted to speak with council. We're getting new chairs. They're ordered.
Somebody has one.
Oh.
You got the one.
Councillor Donaldson is way ahead of all of us right now. It's ridiculous. So he brought it from home. So basically, the last election we did e-voting, except for the last day, which was an e-voting and paper ballot, if you recall. I think it's 2 elections that we've done it this way, including I think a by-election. And so it's still recovering the cough. Anyway, it's not funny. Anyway, so but then the first e-voting event was entirely e-voting. There was 0 paper. So our experience was that we received better feedback when there was a combined, but you also understand that there's an additional cost to that. The e-voting, just so that you know, is a more costly alternative than the paper voting option. Typically you would do an advance by paper, and then you would do the election paper as well. As you know, as all of you are familiar, the e-voting opens on a certain day, and you can vote day and night.
Yeah.
You can only vote once, but you can vote day and night until yes, you can only vote once, Councillor Dickon.
Why was audited over that?
Yeah, so I guess what we were wanting is some idea of what you're thinking, and the reason why we're raising it now is HRM is gonna go out for a large procurement of a e-voting service, and they have offered the opportunity for the municipality of Argyle to join in, all municipalities, not just Argyle, to join in on that as a, I guess, to take advantage of a price. So I leave it up to council. I realize there's not a whole lot of background information. I figured most of it was by memory, which is why I didn't go into heavy details with the report.
Councillor D'Anjamo?
So if we track back, I guess the last one was 2016, which we had e-voting and paper on the last day, is that correct?
Correct.
And then we go back to 2012, which was only e-voting.
I believe 2012 was only e-voting. The by-election was a combination.
And then 2008 would have been only paper.
Correct.
So if we track back to the percentages, I mean, we're looking, with e-voting, we're really trying to track the younger voter. Well, I say younger voter, but more voters, I should say, increase. So I guess we could probably readily put our hands on the percentage of people that voted for all those last 3 or 4 elections.
You can, but I would caution the accuracy of the total voter number. I can give you with accuracy how many people voted in every district that there was an election. But the problem is the denominator, which is the total eligible voters. The total eligible voters comes from the provincial list, and we have not enumerated that list in a long time. So District 5 has a pretty solid list because we actually went and did an enumeration in District 5 only. I think if the total voter, total eligible voter was consistently wrong, it has increased our voting percentage. We always had a very high turnout in voting. I think that it's safe to say that it increased by, on the low end, 5%, on the high end, maybe even as high as 10-15%.
Yeah.
So it's been an improvement, but I caution the data because it's the total eligible voter is only as good as the list, right? If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but, you know, the list was probably skewed in 2016, 12, 8,
Yes.
4, 2000. So
Yeah.
I'm just looking for, you know, that, was there an increase in percentage of people voting?
I think it's a safe answer
I
to
mean,
say yes.
You know, I think that the list, you know, 1 or 2 points here and there, you know, the total eligible voters, I mean, even though you're not, you know, I know what you're saying it's not 100% right, but it's only probably a few points there.
Yeah, I guess the reason why I highlight that and answer what is a basic question with a little bit more detail than normal is that when we did the by-election for District 5, the participation rate was 89.9%.
Wow.
It felt very wrong. You know, like while we were happy that it was such a big turnout, it just, I think it kind of also highlighted the fact that there may have been, that's an extremely high turnout vote.
But I think in that case, which was like, you know, kind of an individual case, there was probably, I don't know which word to use, but
More interest?
very, very much more interest, right?
Agreed.
And,
Agreed.
you know, it was a by-election for a certain reason, and,
Yep.
you know, so that, you know, definitely, you know, piqued people's attention, and so, but that's, you know, pretty remarkable, and I fully agree that, you know, e-voting definitely increased that number, you know, percentage-wise, so.
If you compare, so most of our percentages of voter turnout are on the low end in the 60s
Yeah.
percentage,
Yeah.
and on the high end in 70s.
Okay.
Mid 70s is considered to be
Yeah.
pretty darned good. Now you look at some comparative locations not far from here, the turnout is in the 40%
Yeah,
range.
that's right, yeah.
So we're already blessed with
Yeah.
a very highly engaged demographic, democracy or interest in
You
elections.
just have to go the other side of the line on both sides,
Absolutely.
so.
Yeah.
That tells
So
you-
I guess what I'm getting at, I'm all for e-voting, and, you know, I, you know, really, for me, it's encouraging that people are actually voting, you know? And that's what it's about, you know, so.
I give my consensus to the way it was the last time.
Both e-voting and paper?
Yeah.
I agree. I agree as well.
Warden?
Well, that's what I was gonna say, because the year that we only had e-voting, we ran into some problems.
Yeah.
And the problems were to do with people not being used to it or not following directions very well, because all of a sudden they had and I'll tell you where the problem came. It was with the school boards.
Yes.
Right? School boards gave us a problem. And,
Right, yeah.
and the first name that would come, they thought they had to vote. And all of a sudden, well, we know what happened. We had one of the school board members that won his case, that they threw that election out and they had to go back. Now, because of that, and I don't know if everybody heard in their district, but in my district, people were telling me that if it's e-voting only next time, you won't see me vote, because they had been wrapped on the knuckles kind of thing, you know what I mean? So, I think keeping at least the paper ballot for those who want paper ballots, and you're gonna find that it's the older generation that want that paper ballot. A lot of them want to see that they put an X. To go online and say, no, I vote for that person, it's almost as if they didn't even vote, like, you know what I mean? And not everybody has access to computers, although you can do it on the phone. But it was a bit cumbersome for people who, you know, it scared a lot of people off, that they just didn't want to do it anymore. So I would go with, definitely with the, with both. It might be a little more expensive, but it's important, I think, to have the service so that the people are comfortable in doing their voting.
Agreed.
Got a
And you might-
question?
And you might be able to get, if I may.
Go ahead.
And you might get away with not having a paper polling station in every district. You might be able to share, like, a couple, 3 districts have.
That's right.
A voting station.
Yeah.
How did we do it last time?
I think we reduced the amount of
Yes.
available paper polling stations,
Yes.
but we made it convenient to residents. It wasn't that far away from there. If it wasn't in their district, it was not far away from their district.
Exactly.
It seemed to me we had one at the Panama
Yes.
for multiple districts, and then I think we had one specific in District 4 because it was quite a bit off the beaten path.
There was.
So we just took a geographic look at it and made decisions. There's so many different ways that elections are running now, like, people are getting more accustomed to not voting on election day, because the provincial election, it's open, you know, they have an open
As well.
poll there.
Right.
I come back to District 5, and I think the statistics were like bang on. The IntelliVote, the company that we use, said that if you use a paper and an electronic version, it's usually 2/3. It's either 75-25 or 2/3, 1/3 to e-voting versus paper.
Right.
Is that right?
And we had 2 polls open, and there were 60 paper votes in Quinnen, and there were 61 in Eelbrook, and it was almost identical, 2/3, 1/3.
I'll be darned.
So they know
They know.
how most people vote and the patterns when you provide that service to them. It's pretty amazing. Anyway,
Okay, CEO Muse, does that give you direction, or would you like to have a motion?
you can do that by motion if you're comfortable making it a motion. We can take a look at the procurement options through Halifax. It may not be something you want, but we would present that to you for decision. You may want a different e-voting option, but they're gonna go through the whole procurement process for us.
Could I have a mover?
I'd be willing to put that in the form of a motion, that for the voting for 2020 election be combined with e-voting and paper voting.
I'll second that.
Okay, we've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And my name, motion carried. Next item for decision, transportation and infrastructure renewal cost share agreement. Just gonna open this up. As you've probably read, this, it's an agreement that comes every year, I believe, CEO Muse, and it's part of the cost sharing agreement that we have, and they're just spelling out that we have to respond to this letter, I guess.
Yes, so if you recall, we were chosen, I guess, to I don't know if you get chosen to pay a bill, but we got chosen to cost share on a road last year, and it was Birch. We had submitted 2 roads. One is Birch Drive and the other is Riverside Drive, both of which represent the roads attached to the Plymouth Green Acres.
Green Acres, yeah.
Subdivision. So just a quick update on that. So the work hasn't started on Birch Drive yet,
Okay.
and it's intended to begin this fall, and it'll happen this fall. Riverside Drive was a longer road and was denied at the time.
That's right.
But there is a hole in the Riverside Drive road that the residents are saying, if you do Birch Drive and you don't touch the road, you're gonna have a problem, right? So the Department of Transportation has committed to fixing, that particular pothole as part of the Birch Drive repair.
Great.
So, council really hasn't looked at a list of all J-class roads and said, these are the roads we like to do. So because we haven't really taken a strategic look at all of the roads, I would recommend that we do not submit a cost funding request for this year. For the only road that has been raised, either politically or administratively, is the Riverside Drive from the residents. They're concerned about that hole. We've been assured by the Department of Transportation that it will be fixed in this project. Therefore, I think I'm not suggesting that Riverside Drive is in perfect shape. But we have a lot of roads that are not in perfect shape, and I would prefer to take a more strategic approach to this decision and give you more time and to look at any requests that are coming through and determine what you want to do each year, if anything, around cost sharing for roads.
Very good.
So that's my summary of the situation. Both councillors in that location aren't here, but they have been informed
Yeah, okay.
that's the case. So has the residents that have raised the concern. They know that hole is going to be fixed.
Yeah.
So that would be my recommended course of action, which is to not submit this year.
Yeah.
We have the opportunity to submit every year.
Every year.
Or shelf.
Yeah, table it, or shelf it, it's a great word. We just won't vote on it, do anything on it.
Yeah, I don't require a motion. A motion to not apply
Right.
is kind of like a double negative or whatever. I don't require a motion, but unless you wanted to make a different decision, then
Right.
a motion would be in order.
Everybody's comfortable with that? Right on, great. Okay, next item we have is the grants to organization amendments to policy process, and this has been distributed to us to look at it, and CAO Muse, I prefer if you could go over
Sure.
this. Oh, it's on our screen, great.
So it's on screen. I hope you're able to read it. I know that the intention is to have it on screen on Facebook Live as well.
Great.
How's the sound out there now? I see there's a message. The sound is very low.
Yeah, it sounds good here.
It sounds, your sound is okay? Okay. Okay, we'll just keep an eye on the sound. So,
Do you want the camera on the screen?
he's gonna switch it there.
Oh, switch it there, okay.
So the- Yeah, the mic's on. So it's now up on Facebook Live. I just wanted to wait until it came up on the screen.
Sure.
There's always a delay.
Yeah.
So this work started internally, and there we go. Oh, you can't read that from here, but so basically, I just want to talk a little bit about why this is being brought to your attention in the first place. So our grants to organizations policy, we've been doing the same type of application for, I think probably 4, if not more years. We've made some adjustments to the grants to organizations policy. However, and most of those changes were relating to one-time requests, as well as like emergency funding requests. And we did make some changes to the district community grant. We had increased the district community grant at some point. That would have been about at least 5 years ago. So why are we looking at this? Well, we're looking at it because this year's process, we found some weaknesses in the process, and we are constantly bringing one-of requests to council. So even with a policy, even with what we're doing, it's not working, it's either not working for our residents, or it's not working for us, or a combination of both.
Yeah.
So there are lots of things that are working with our current process. So there are things that are working. I just want to identify the things that we have seen over the course of our internal observation. So this is an administration request coming your way. So I won't read every identified issues, but what we have is the form is dated. We ask the same questions often multiple times. we do change the wording of the questions, but it requires a lot of work on behalf of the resident to apply and reapply the same information. So the form is slightly dated. It is a paper format. You can print it from online, but you cannot, like, you have to fill it in and submit it in either an email or paper form. So there's the opportunity of human error. And we have seen that this year, and we've seen it in the past, where applications, quote unquote, came in and they didn't, or we did not, or we missed it. So either it didn't come in and we have no evidence to suggest one way or another, or we made the error internally in the administration office. Human error happens, and we have no way to discern the difference, right? So the process is entirely application-based. It's all reactive. So you don't set any policy in advance. You don't tell staff, look, when we go out and ask for money from our nonprofit organizations, we want to focus on this or that. So what you are doing then is you're relying on your applications, which is okay. It's an applications process. But there's a piece there that we could never fully connect for you, right? So there was a time where staff would make recommendations for funding amounts, but we found that to be quite inappropriate because we felt like that was a council decision and we were imposing our own will on you with no guidance to do that. So it's one thing if you tell us how to do that, like we don't want to see these applications, we only want to see these. That's okay. That's a policy that you can create as council, but we should not be leading that process unless you tell us how. Okay? So, and that's another identified weakness in the process. Some applications are coming in, like there's multiple applications for the same organization. We've always kind of struggled with that, but we haven't really come to a solution. There are ways that we can come to a better solution, or just say that that's okay. Like you apply once and you apply for a specific purpose. Some we find in looking at the applications that they're not necessarily utilized for exactly the purpose that they intended, and there's no follow-up from staff or council to determine whether or not those funds are spent in exactly the way that they said. Okay, for some of the larger applications like the community halls, we held back at 10%. They had to tell us what they did before they got released. But that's the only one right now that's doing that. So I mentioned that we do find exceptions to rules when we don't know about a project until it comes out. Sometimes funding announcements don't happen within the deadline period that we set. We want to support that project. We don't have a place in the budget to support it, and we kind of fumble with how do we actually support that particular request. Most of those, I will say, do not come from Argyle. Most of which come from a larger event organization. Because like Sea Kayak, I think of Sea Kayak, they get treated slightly differently when it comes in, but we know well in advance it's coming. So it's never a surprise. We know it's coming. Others, like Music Week, might come up like that, and it's like, well, we're doing something, and then suddenly we have it, or suddenly we don't. I just use that as an example, because that has happened in the past. So the decision-making is very efficient, but I'm not like, you get to the bottom line pretty fast as a council. But in order to do that, you have to go through hundreds and hundreds of pages of applications, and we used to send you every single page. And then we started sending, just the bigger ones. And then it's like, who are we to decide which ones you get to see and which ones you don't, okay? So we need to change that as well. So why now? Why are we looking at this now? We're in the final year. Technically, we're not in the final year of the community hall special grants, but we funded every community hall. We accelerated the funding so that we could get them all in. So that was $45,000 we set aside a year. Last year we spent only 15. I say only, well, comparatively to 45. So we are in the first year of the fire department grants supporting vehicle purchases. So that's an additional amount that we have committed in the last year of community halls. So staff of course is concerned that, where is that headed, right? It's headed up and sharply, right? It's headed up and sharply. So, and that's okay if that's what you want. but we just wanna make sure that we're making sure you're well aware of what's happening. Increased special requests, particularly from outside Argyle, I don't wanna pick on outside Argyle, but our policy is specific that we give priority to Argyle, nonprofit first. But we consider, applications outside Argyle all the time, and Yarmouth also considers Argyle applications in Yarmouth when they're large, okay? But I don't think they see it as much as we do. Timing, for those reasons, we felt like the timing was appropriate to bring this to your attention. Also, we feel like technology can offer a lot of answers to your questions or our questions. So we did a data, and I'm gonna try to flip through this pretty fast because you've actually seen this data in advance. But basically what we did was we went back 4 years. And we said, well, in order for us to understand the problem, we need to know what's happening. And so what you see, which will come up on screen on Facebook very soon, is how council invests their grant funds. And this is by type, by the nature of investment. So these are influenced entirely by your applications that are coming in.
And this is a 4-year.
This is the average
Average.
over 4
Thank you.
years.
Average of 4.
Average over 4 years. So 1, 2 clearly are district community grants and community halls. That has been your 1, 2. So by community grants, I'm also referring to your community cleanup grants. So that includes your district community grants as well as your ditch cleanup program. So those two you've always been very happy with, and obviously that's where you invest a good section of your money. Fire protection is new, so that we actually spend a lot more than that every year. We are actually closer to, well, we are exactly at this point at, was it 15 plus 30 or no?
What are we giving for?
What's the second grant for Quinnen? 25, yeah, for a total of 40. So we're giving a total of 40. So the average of 22,000 is because we took that number and we included things like, there's other EMO-related grants, but that number's going to go up because you only have 1 year of your 4 that has included that 40,000. So that's rising, okay? So arguably, the community hall is gonna go to, is not going to zero, but it's gonna go to substantially less.
Yes.
Again, the amount of which is up to you. YMCA pool, we excluded things like Mariner Center and Yarmouth International Airport and all of those that you have an agreement, like that you're co-funders.
But aren't we with the YMCA also? We don't vote on that, it's presented to us and isn't it?
No, that one is a nonprofit organization that requests special funding from us to support their operations, primarily their pool operations.
Right.
So I've considered the YMCA different than the Mariner Center.
Yeah, because I wonder
Because,
why.
yes, because the Mariner Center, we have an agreement amongst other municipal units to fund a third. So we have an intermunicipal agreement. We don't consider those as part of the grants to
Getcha.
organizations.
I get you.
This is a nonprofit organization that is not covered by an intermunicipal
Getcha.
agreement, although the 3 of us fund it.
Funded that, yeah.
Okay.
It's not an agreement. No.
It's not an agreement amongst the 3 to fund in a specific way,
Great.
okay?
Makes
So
sense.
that's why it's included here. Local recreation, festivals, health and environment, et cetera. You see the amounts. The 2 amounts that I would raise to your attention is the absence of amount. So transportation and trail development, to me, considering the amount of times that we might look at that and think of the importance of that, this number looks unusually low. And it's a function of the amount of money that is being requested, right? So the trails, for instance, we would have funded specific trail projects upon request in Wedgeport and West Pimlico, and we would have funded $4,000 each year for the Trails Association for trail development. Now, if we went back 5 or 6 years, you might see a big amount
That's right, I remember we had given something.
that we gave to the Trails Association alongside an ACOA grant to improve their trails.
Absolutely.
So those things happen, but they don't happen every year. They seem to happen, like, they happen big and then they
Spurts.
go off. So if council wanted a more strategic investment in trails, you now know approximately what you're contributing to trails. And so if that number doesn't make sense compared to what you'd like to do, that's the purpose of collecting this data.
Why are you pinpointing that? What brought this up? Is it a strategic we have?
Well, I think that we often,
honestly,
I'm picking on trails
Yes.
because we talk about trails all the time. We have an active transportation study that indicates the importance of trails. We actually raise the issue of using trails for transportation as opposed to sidewalks or other forms of transportation that might attract people into our communities.
Okay.
Right, so in a lot of ways, trails are attached to our strategy and to our active transportation and to recreation.
I get you.
Recreation will often raise trails as part of their active transportation conduit, yet the funding does not, in my view,
Yeah.
does not match
So,
the
we're not putting our money
importance.
where our mouth is.
Correct, that would be.
Because
a-
sidewalk would be one that I would say, because you can't walk at night unless you've got a flashlight or, if you've got coyotes on a trail, but on a, you can walk from in Tuscan or Public or Westport, if there was a sidewalk. So that's why I'm wondering, maybe,
Yeah, so this wouldn't
Yeah.
be sidewalk,
No,
this would be
of course.
trail, so.
but we haven't done anything in sidewalks.
Right,
don't
so
have a
any cost to maintain sidewalks in West Pubnico, Tuscan, or Wedgeport
Yeah.
would not be here. This
Yeah.
is outside requests of organizations for multipurpose trails.
Yeah, but that would be like in the recreational part. The sidewalks could be, no, sorry, recreation, you've got it separated there. Okay, you've got one line for already. Yeah.
Right, so local recreation,
That's good. I'm all set.
you're good, okay.
I'm good with that, yeah.
So, I mean, you're not gonna analyze the data tonight, but this is just, and so the next slide basically talks about, what does it say? And so I'll really go fast through this. I'm not gonna say too much here, just that on average, 220,000 is invested in grants to organizations annually. And that represents about 3% of your total budget. So if some of you were here long enough to remember that the Municipal Government Act used to restrict that number to 1%.
Oh, yeah.
So that is telling you that you're spending 3 times that fictitious amount that the MGA used to restrict us.
Yes, but we've broadened what is a grant
You're right.
compared to what used to be years ago.
You're correct.
Last year, or before, it was just little grants to community organizations. Basically, what our personal grants to organizations that we hand out, right? A lot of them was going through grants to organizations.
I get you.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. So the what a grant is and what it looks like has changed a lot since the MGA was first putting that rule in. So anyway, there's just some highlights on what the data says. I'm gonna go a little bit faster here because I'm going slow. So there is also a slide, there's 2 other slides on district community grant, how the grants are allocated by district and how some of them are outside and some of them are inside. What we found was where there was more community halls, that's what spiked the numbers.
Of course.
And where there have been investments, for instance, in District 5 and District 1, both received for the first time the fire loan grant to support the vehicles.
Right.
Those are spiking 1 and 5. So if you had a lot of community halls and just so happened to have a fire grant, you're number 1, right? So it isn't a function of population or a function of commercial assessment, et cetera, or business or residential assessment. It is being driven mostly by where is the infrastructure,
Great point.
Where is
That's
it?
my question that I said.
right? So District 4, for instance, is quite, you take District 4 as a for instance, it did not receive any fire funding, but it has 3 halls.
3 halls.
And each of them received an amount of money.
Such a great point.
And some other districts don't have a hall at all or may only have 1. So keep that in mind. Most of this is driven by community hall funding,
Yes.
which is gonna change. Okay?
Yeah.
So, go
Can I
ahead.
make a point?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
the last 3 rows outside of Argyle, regional effort in YMCA, those are large amounts compared to what, percentage-wise to what's given within our own districts in Argyle.
Yeah.
I don't know what the exact percentage, I didn't add them up, but.
Yes. I don't disagree with you.
I mean, I feel as a municipality, we're very generous to our neighboring municipalities compared to the way it comes from the other directions.
But
So-
sometimes it all depends on where the infrastructure is.
Exactly.
And for
Great
our
point.
residents, you know, they're the ones that, you know, use the, you know, whatever it is in Yarmouth, for example, right?
Mariner
So
Center.
that's what happens there.
But you should never ask a question you don't know the answer to, but I'm going to. For the kayak symposium, for example, do we get much outside funding for that, or is that primarily Argyle funding?
I'll compare, it is primarily Argyle funding. It did receive funds from the town and municipality, I don't recall how much. But it was, if we take I guess I'll compare it with the recent request that we haven't resolved, which is the Communities in Bloom. So the Communities in Bloom, we would have been asked to fund for $10,000, so would the municipality of Yarmouth, and the town was in for like 60.
Yeah.
Right, so if you think about, you know, that it is primarily a town event, so the town is in for a lot more. Yes, the request to us is significant, but it's 1/6 of the request that the town put in to their own. I don't know that all the activities are that one-sided in the way that they're funded, but I think that the Sea Kayak Symposium might be similar. It might look similar.
The municipality of Yarmouth was $1,000, and the town was $525. So,
Okay.
and our contribution was $7,500, is that correct?
Yeah.
So if
But
you
I
look at the
also-
percentages, yeah.
It's-
I look at who benefits restaurant and accommodation wise too, you gotta look at that equation too. But anyhow, that's not an argument for tonight.
Yeah.
No, but
I
it's,
am a homebody.
It's a point. It's
And
a-
I'm a homebody and I'm not gonna
Excuse-
apologize for it.
no, and
Great point.
the whole purpose of doing this is that you can see for yourself
Yeah, for the
what,
money.
I mean, how you interpret the numbers and your opinion on what should happen next is really where we're headed,
That's
right?
right.
Exactly.
So there is another slide that I'm just gonna skip because it actually gets just a little deeper
Yep.
in individual communities. I don't necessarily feel like it's something we need to spend a lot of time on, only that you can look at your own communities and be curious. So the data on doing the districts is that they are mostly even, without setting it in policy, so we're accidentally even. But I think a lot of that is driven by the fact that you have your community hall and your district community grants are allocated equally or as equal as they can be, right? So that's driving that. But there are some communities that have less and have more. And I will say that in West Pubnico, it was difficult to allocate the two because most of them are in District 8, although the benefit is to both. So I allocated a percentage of total funding in for West Pubnico projects. I allocated, I think it was 70% to District 8 and 30% to District 9, because most of the requests were coming from District 8. District 9 has tremendous assets, but it's funded by the province. Like I think of the Village and I think of other,
Oh, yeah.
right? So some of them are less funded by us. It's not that they're less important. I just want to make that clear.
And it's kind of like the example I gave earlier about, you know, the infrastructure being in Yarmouth when West Pumlico, a lot of the infrastructure is in West Pumlico, not in Lower West, right?
Correct. But it benefits the community.
Exactly.
That's right.
It is the same community. You know,
Correct.
there's two
Sure it
districts.
is.
So I just want to make it clear that that's how I calculated that for the both of you, information. So, again, about 5,000 in each district represents district community grants and community cleanup. So we spend about 5,000 in each district each year for that purpose. And the regional effort, so there was a line item that said regional effort. Those were things that we could not allocate to a community. So yes, it's called the Yarmouth Ground Search and Rescue, but they represent the county. Yes, they're located in Arcadia, but they are a regional effort. So there's a distinction between regional effort and and an event that's hosted in in the town would have been considered not as a regional effort, but outside Argyle, okay? So, long presentation. The next slide just highlights the possible future state. It's actually more important to hear from you at this point, which is what we're asking in the last slide. So what we need is an acknowledgement that we're onto something here, right? That there is a change that's required, and that we will attempt to build it together as council and staff. So we're asking for permission to further investigate that.
Yes.
I went over this in depth. For some reason, I was interested. But
Seems less obvious now after my presentation.
I settled in on the second one over. I'm just wondering where staff is setting at this point. Based on what you guys have uncovered with all your data. Like that's where I settled. Not saying that that's the right place
Right.
that we are, but that's where I landed.
Staff has come to some conclusions, but they also need your help to get there. So I think one of the conclusions that we've come to is that we believe that automation, that an online application using either a custom software that's locally sourced or a SurveyMonkey type software could address a lot of the issues that we see with the current with the current application process. Okay, so what we think is that if council works with us and tells us what they want, we can have the software do what council wants. So for instance, if there's a threshold of money that you feel like it's just like, why are you wasting my time, staff? You can ask the computer to say, if an application is this amount or less, it doesn't even come here. You don't even see it. You can do that, right? And it's automated, so it doesn't require staff time and energy. It only requires staff time and energy to create the system. The second piece I would say around what staff has observed is that there are ways to tailor the application to the application. Every year you give $1,500 to festivals. Why do we keep asking?
Thank you.
Right, so,
Thank you.
you know, are you the Festival de Haramba? Yes. Congratulations, you just got $1,500. Do you need anything else?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, well then now you have to apply, right?
Well,
So,
really,
so
makes sense.
you clear off the 1,500, you clear off the
Yes,
obvious ones.
absolutely.
The obvious two, in my mind, were the senior applications, which are typically low and support their fundraising efforts,
Yep.
and the festivals.
Thank you.
And so you decide which ones you want to pre-approve, and it gets done. So that's what we're looking at. So then there's the potential of a video application. This is, I shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna say it. There's the possibility that applications could receive a 20-second video clip, so that they could explain in 20 seconds what they're asking for, and council could easily access that information, not have to read through reams and reams of paper. And of course, if you're asking for $20,000, you gotta go through the hoops. But if you're asking for 500, you shouldn't. So we think that automation can get us there in a lot of ways, but we also have to make strategic decisions in advance. That's where we need you. That's where we need you to say, well, this is actually where we want our money to be spent. There's the possibility of all of you individually, before the grants get requested, to go in your community and understand your community and say, you know what, these 3 organizations have to be funded, and this is why. So instead of waiting for those applications, you can start by thinking about those important assets in your community, and say, these are the places we'd like to see some focus, and we will make that focus happen through the application, right? Every year we ask in the application, are you this, are you that, or are you this? But we don't use that information, right? Because we don't have any guidance as to how much you want to spend in those individual areas, right? So that's where we're thinking right now. If that that was long-winded, but does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we might need a meeting just to talk about this.
Right, exactly.
Like,
I agree.
so, yeah, so we could move it over.
I would like to comment on an item. I mean, it's not right here, but reading through there, it's happened in my district where some of the organizations are not a society because they can't afford it. They can't afford to spend $2,000 to become a society, to be nonprofit. And what happens, there'll be multiple asks from the same, let's say, Club Social des Îles or Festival de la Barre, but it's for different stuff, but because it's, so, we don't want to forget that.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't want to leave them out, because I thought there was a portion on that. Some are not even societies or nonprofits, so, but they're so important to your community.
I think they are, I think most of them that apply are societies. It's that they apply for multiple things,
Yeah.
which is not a that's not a bad thing.
No.
I just, and so some things ought to be automatic. I think of Festival de la Barge,
Yeah.
right? I think of that application,
Yeah.
there's an organization that's 2 or 3 applications, and one of them's for a festival, and one of them's for the chapelle, and one of them's for this, and that's all legit. It's just, we can just tailor it so that the information that we desire, we get.
That's right.
Right, because if we don't get it, there's no way for staff to say, oh, well, we didn't get, we got a $5,000 ask and we never got the budget.
Yeah.
Right, well, it doesn't accept an application in an automated world. If you don't give the computer what it wants, it doesn't submit the application.
Yeah.
So in some way, it forces them to be a little bit more organized, but only for the big asks.
That's right.
Right, well, I'm not suggesting we need a budget for a $500
That's right.
request.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
that kind of thing that we can't, if staff was to be able to do that by paper, it would take a tremendous amount of time. And that automation can happen on a computer easily.
I think,
Go ahead.
I think it's important to have a cost of, not just ask for $2,000, without being able to justify where that $2,000 is gonna go. Go back to festivals. I'm sure, we give $1,500 without asking any questions. I think it would be important for festivals to give us a budget of, where's this, you need $1,500 for what? Because we probably have festivals that are getting money that, do they have any festival anymore? You know what I mean? It's called a festival, but there's probably no activities going on. So where's that money going, right? And these are things, I think we should know how much a festival is costing. Most festivals don't cost a lot.
Isn't it on the application, Danny? Wouldn't it be on your application?
I don't think they
I'll let
include
you
it.
know.
Uh,
I thought it would be on the application.
I can only say that some submit a budget and some do not.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's
You know
good to
that,
have a budget,
Right.
to know.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's no expenses in a festival, why are we giving them $1,500? Where's that $1,500 go? I mean, I can think of one festival that's probably not even a festival anymore, but the applications come in every year. And I know there's no activities happening. They use that money for something else, but that's not what that money's for. That's not why we did this. There was a time when we had a lot of festivals. We had, every village had,
Oh, yeah.
Had a Cajun festival. Most of the villages had Cajun festivals. You don't see that much anymore. There's still some, Wedgeport does. Public Code does as well, I think. And there's activities in those festivals. But I can tell you there are some that I don't see any activities at all.
Gotta come to Argyle.
Pardon me?
You gotta come to Argyle.
Yeah,
Plenty of
there's
action there.
activities in that one.
Plenty of action there, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's just my
Councillor Doctorow?
Just thinking about the committee hall project that we had, and that was for how many years?
It was supposed to be for 5.
And in 4 years, we completed the,
Mhm.
how many committee halls had applied? There 9? Why do I have 9 in my head?
8 or 9.
8 or 9, okay.
Yeah.
And the average was around 15 grand, or?
Most took advantage of the full
15.
full
Yeah.
amount. There was one that did not require the full amount.
And that was, in your opinion, it was pretty effective? It definitely,
100%.
so I guess where I'm coming at is,
Yes, such a great,
okay, put the committee halls aside, but all these grants that we're getting, I sometimes feel that, you look at the application and it's kind of like a watered down application for this, for that, for this, small thing. Why couldn't we have the same structure that, okay, put these in the category, and, there's 10 of you.
Yeah.
All right, year 1, there's 3. Year 2, 3. And then give them the capital, not just a Band-Aid, but something that they can really bite on and get something done, Because I just feel like, it's like just a watered down, a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there, every year applying, if they could have a project that they could, use 10 grand or, 15 grand, instead of giving them $1,200 and $1,100 and $1,500 and,
And that's the kind of input I think a special meeting of council
Yeah.
would really inform us.
Yeah.
Because what you just said is certainly, the community hall project is a perfect example
Yeah, yeah.
of a success story
Yeah.
in what you're describing.
Like,
If I'm to describe the grants that have been issued in Argyle, there's a lot in volume, but less in amount.
exactly.
And then you look at outside Argyle, there's less in volume, but more, less in volume of the requests,
Yeah.
but the requests are large.
Yeah, sorry.
And so, it seems as if our nonprofit organizations, are not asking for as much money, probably because they know they're not gonna get it.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And there are
Exactly.
other examples where they ask for $5,000, but they only want 1,500.
Yeah,
Right,
This
and
is
so
so
how do
true.
you distinguish
Exactly.
from all of that? And I think the
Yeah.
part of it is what do you want as a council?
We've
And
gotta
then
be
we can
trained.
filter that down to
Yeah.
through the application process.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Anyway, that's my point.
Yes, sir, Warden
Just-
News?
Just one more thing, and that's to do with the halls. When we started this, we said they could apply, there would be 3 per year.
Yeah.
And once you had it, you couldn't reapply for 5 years.
That's right.
So does that mean that we are now going back to hall number 1, if they have another project that they can reapply?
That's up to council.
We didn't say that this was gonna continue.
We said it was a 5-year program, we didn't say it would continue.
Okay, I wasn't
it-
sure.
And that's why we're bringing this up now, because we need direction. You can do nothing and not change the process at all, but we need to know something about
That's
the
right.
community halls, because
Right.
we might get applications, we won't know what to do with them.
Because if we end the project the way it is now, right now, community halls do not apply for any kind of funding unless it's for an event. Nothing for capital.
That's correct.
Right? So once we eliminate this program that we got in there, then we have to put the halls right back into the mix of the other grants, right? We can't say now you can't apply anymore for anything. We would have to put them back in so that now they can apply for $1,200 or $1,500.
That would dilute and
Exact-
water down even
Exactly.
more, right? So-
Exactly.
Absolutely.
That's the way it was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And they never got anything done.
yeah.
That's right, you're totally
Now,
right.
all these halls have had major renovations done, most of them.
And some multiplied the money through applications through seniors.
Exactly.
They
Exactly.
used their money and tripled it.
Exactly,
Infrastructure
that's
and,
right.
yeah.
And they were
Maybe
able to
audited.
do that because they had money to do a project and there was more money
Okay,
coming.
so I guess, so why can't we, if we could do that for other organizations, and then they can leverage, a $10,000 grant.
Yeah.
Such
I-
a great
I guess-
point, such a
I guess
great
it
point.
depends on what kind of
Because
project.
we've been
it
leveraging
is.
money ever since I've been here on major projects. We've been and I guess we never really, I guess I never really clued in about the smaller projects, right? But I think we should probably start thinking a little bit bigger
Yeah.
than, watered down $1,500 grants, right?
Yeah. Great point.
Anyway,
So what we've done is Band-Aided a process.
yeah,
And we've
Bingo.
Band-Aided it multiple times.
Yeah.
At some point, it's time for a new car. And that's what we would recommend. We would recommend a complete transformation.
Yeah.
Which means that everything that you know about grants to organizations is up for debate. Like,
definitely.
Oh, yeah.
so, and
Like
because of your point, if your point represents the majority of this council in the way that they wanna go, is we don't necessarily have to spend more money to do that, we just have to spend it differently.
Yeah, that's right,
And in order to do that, we have to do away with other things that we do.
yeah.
So that's the place where we need your guidance. We will transform it, but we need your instructions, right?
And it might not just be.
But we need your interest as
It might
well.
not just be, the new car, it might be the garage on top of the new car.
Yeah.
You know?
That's right.
No, I mean, it could be, and I'm just gonna throw it out there, you may not, like, could eliminate the district community grant. And that could be incorporated in another grant policy. Like, we don't know what it looks, I'm not suggesting that,
Yeah.
I'm just giving you an example, so those are the things that you kinda have to think about. Oh, okay, well, I'm used to doing this, right? But now I'm gonna be doing that. And this transformative change is hopefully happening in February of 2020, right? So understand the nature of the timing of that.
Yeah.
Is that you have an opportunity to engage with your public in a different way around grants organizations.
Yeah.
I think that's important in a year in election. I think it is important. Gives you an opportunity. But we need permission to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what we're asking for. If you're interested in this type of work, if you're not, then we'll stop and we'll do it, but we still need to Band-Aid. But we're suggesting transformation.
I would also suggest that you have communications with these groups, because it's gonna be quite a changing process to apply.
Yeah.
Because not all of a sudden,
Oh, yeah.
election year, you got 20,000 people on your case, why did you change
I
that?
mean,
Yeah.
election
You know,
year
so-
or not election
Or
year.
not election year.
As far as I'm concerned, it's a more progressive way of
Yeah.
moving forward.
And communications to the
and,
people.
And getting stuff done.
Yeah. It's
Instead
important.
of just, again, Band-Aiding it or watering it down or whatever word you want to use.
Yeah,
It's a way of,
absolutely.
I think it should give it more oomph if you know what I mean, so. Anyway,
Would you want a motion to give you some directions, or do you think you've got enough?
I think, you don't have to, I think the direction I'd like is in the presentation, in the sense that, pardon me, I hiccup, really, I think it's the permission to move forward with an understanding that we will be transforming it. Now, you don't have to decide what it looks like.
exactly.
No, no,
yeah,
of course.
But I think it is to accept a solution, and to develop, so it would be like, we need more information from you. So we don't wanna just throw a survey down your throats. We wanna understand that you're on board with this change, even if you don't know exactly what it looks like, you have a sense of what it looks like. So a motion to entertain an amendment to the existing grants to organizations policy and process would give us the appropriate direction from you now.
Also move that,
And I think we need to have a special meeting to
Guaranteed.
discuss
Not even a
it.
question.
Oh, definitely.
guaranteed.
Yeah.
Not even a
Yes.
question.
And okay, good.
Okay, motion on the floor. You've all heard it. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary by nay, motion carried. Great point. Okay, we'll move on to tax relief under 7D. And looking here, we have Laura, not gonna say the name, but a number with 8952. The amount, I don't know if you want to speak on to that a bit, or?
Errors at the PVSC level that they've corrected. 9 out of 10 times when we ask for relief, it's duplication of AAN accounts that are either PVSC or land registry. The total requested for relief is $294.66. We require a motion of council.
I'll make a motion. And I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary by nay, motion carried. Okay, next on the list is the Yarmouth Splash Park and attachment to it. Reading this, they're looking to, you know what, I missed this. To be very honest with you, I didn't read that. Sorry about that. Or Muse, did you?
Yes, I got the
Could you-
letter.
thank
The
you,
letter was
yes.
sent to me,
I did
and
not
I
read that.
forwarded it to our CAO, just to put it on here. They're looking for, they would like to have someone from our municipality to be on this Splash Park Committee. I have no idea who's on it, what's actually, how often they meet or whatever. It just, they say that they feel that they would like to have someone from our municipality to be on the committee, to be represented on that committee. They're looking at 3 places.
I'd just like to know, I actually sent a text to Linda Gallagher, because
Okay.
I know her well, she was my former principal.
Oh, there you go.
Asking exactly that, because I would put my name, but I can't meet until at least 3:30 in the afternoon.
Mhm.
And, yeah, I'm kind of curious as to how often they meet. And the other question I asked, would that obligate us financially?
Thank
Like,
you.
how does that
Well,
Thank
work?
you.
that's what I'm
It does
wondering.
not.
Does
No,
not.
But,
but if we are,
I shouldn't use the word intent, but the intent is to have a board member from the municipality so that, you know, can bring it back to us.
Right.
And chances are they'll probably be asking for money.
Mhm.
That's just how it works, right? So-
They'll likely ask you for money whether we have a rep.
right,
Or not, yes.
true.
better chance of getting it, yeah.
But what you should be aware of, if anybody is interested, and it's okay to be on a board that isn't a municipal board, it's just that you don't have the same protection. So you would, if they're gonna go ahead and do fundraising or do any sort of events, as a director, you would not be protected by our insurance, because it's not a subcommittee of council.
Oh,
So you'd have to, I mean, the appropriate thing to do is to ask whether or not there's any directors and officers liability coverage for the board members, which I can either do on your behalves. I just think that you shouldn't make a decision until you know that for sure. Now, the way that the council, if council wants to support somebody on that board, it can do so, but you're not actually appointing that person, right? Because it's not your board. So you would be requesting Councillor Albright, for instance, to I don't know, to sit on the board, but that it's very clear it's not a
Sit on the
municipal
committee.
subcommittee. That's all. That's the only, concern that we would raise.
I'm on a committee such as that with the housing. This is not a committee of council, the
Correct.
choice. And the reason I'm not on their, I'm not even on their board or whatever. I attend their meetings, right?
Right.
That's basically it. And we just happened, I remember a while back, we got a letter stating that they were going to start meeting regarding that, and that anybody could attend, and Aldrich and I were the 2 that went,
Right.
And we started going and we kept going, so.
Well,
But it's the same kind of thing.
it is, and they're technically not asking you to be a voting member.
No.
What they're asking is having a representative on the committee.
Yes.
So a way around that might be that we will join as a non-voting observer, and you're not actually a board director in any way. You're not able to vote, but you're receiving information,
Right.
and that's what they want, right? And it might be better not to have a vote and to be able to speak as a non-voting member. That's, I don't know the legalities around that as a lawyer would, but I think that would protect you, because you're not actually voting. So,
I would need more information, though, I can't make a decision. It interests me, it all depends on when they meet, that's the biggest thing for me. Unless anybody else wants to jump at the splash pad. I'd be willing to.
dive in.
I'd like to, in the
Dive in.
summertime I would.
So would you like me to get more information for council?
I would think we'd need more information on,
Okay.
insurance and the time they meet and that, yeah.
Okay, we can do that.
And bring that back to our next meeting. Thank you, CEO Muse. Okay, from there we'll go on to notice period of municipal policy, vacation policy. And that's CEO Muse with you. So a few things highlighted there.
Yes, so this is to correct an issue that I have with a personnel policy. The vacation policy, oftentimes what happens is when we don't hire people new. Oftentimes, we hire people with a lot of years' experience. And so, while the policy said between 1 and 10 years, you get, it's,
Yeah, 1 in 10 years.
yeah, so there was a point where it was 2 weeks vacation to start, that was eliminated. And so, so as part of this is a clerical issue that we're trying to address, which is to say, if you, from years 1 to 10, you're at 3 weeks. And then year 10 plus, you're at 4, and then 18 years or more, 5. Some municipalities have 6 and 7 weeks vacation. If they're into like 20, 30, 40 years, we don't have that in our policy. So, and of course, in practice, what was happening is we were hiring people not brand new, but many years' experience, and I could only give them 2 weeks vacation. Well, they wouldn't take the job. It's because they were coming from a job that had 3 or 4. And so that most of the times they were coming from a job and sacrificing at least a week's vacation. So what I was doing was making exceptions through the actual employment contract. And I wanted the policy to reflect the reality of the situation, which is why I'm requesting this change. Now, this can't be voted on today. You haven't received 7 days' notice, I don't believe. So it would be something for the committee of the whole or the next meeting
Very good.
at your leisure.
If I may.
Yes, go ahead.
The only thing you were saying about the 6 and 7 weeks, I personally, it's just myself thinking this way, for an employee that has been here 25 years, I'd like to see that there 5 weeks bumped up to 6 myself.
Well, Councillor Digdon, what we can do.
If it can be done, I don't know.
Well, I think what I can do for you is provide you examples of what other municipalities do in the region. So rather than just simply pick a 25, it might be multiples, different multiples that we can consider. If you wish to give that permission, we can provide that information for you before you make your final decision.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Okay, no,
Sure, that would be interesting.
noted,
Yeah.
noted.
Yeah.
Certainly, we don't want to be in a situation where we're tremendously different from our neighbors.
Exactly.
No, for sure.
So your point is well taken. Okay, we'll
Thank
have
you.
that for a committee of the whole.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move up to number 9, correspondence, and for information, we have the Western Counties Regional Library, 2018-2019 annual report for your reading pleasure. We also have on 9B, Joint Municipal Fire Services Committee Bulletin, attachment to that. C would be Compass Communication Briefing. There's an attachment there. 9D, Letter of Completion of LWPW-WTPV System. That's a lot of Ws. It's for information.
Lower West Pubnico wastewater treatment photovoltaic system. That was the test.
Wow.
Basically,
Why didn't you write it out?
we're collecting solar.
Why didn't you write it out?
I don't know. I don't know.
Not enough space on the agenda.
We didn't have, we ran out of gigabytes.
Well, that's what it means, okay. Number 9E, Internet for Nova Scotia, update. F is the Atlantic Fisheries Fund. G is Shared Strategy for Trails in Nova Scotia. And H is Nova Scotia NSPI Letter of Confirmation, Solar Electricity. Any questions or anything? It's like I said, it's for correspondence and for information.
So effective November 1st, you're selling solar power to Nova Scotia Power.
November 1st,
Yeah. So you're in the solar biz.
business,
Is that
right?
Friday?
Hmm?
Is that Friday?
You're
It's this
right,
Friday.
Friday, you're
It's
right.
it's this Friday. yeah.
Already,
Yeah.
That's for the West Pubnico treatment
I
plant,
was gonna
not
ask
for
you.
the fire.
Fire
I'll
hall.
have to go watch when the actual goes by or
It'll be
something.
cloudy and rainy.
Who name only.
Actually,
We'll send you,
Really
we'll
bad
send you
weather.
the updates every half hour
Yeah.
as to how much we're selling.
Is there a needle that goes up and down?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No.
okay. Financial requests, we've got 2, Kentville Bicentennial Society, Danny?
Yes, I move that we give them $500 for their upcoming celebrations for 200 years, that was celebration of their village of Kentville.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And my name, motion carried. Councillor Digdon?
Yes, I'd like to give $500 to Papillon Pisoli. It's a preschool program that they have going down Pubnico, works very good. So I'd make that into a motion, $500.
Been moved and seconded, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And my name, motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay, next, number 11, agenda topics for next meeting or a notice of motion. Anybody have anything they'd like to bring up? If not, question period. Did we get anything, Alain,
On the questions,
Question on
let me
Facebook
just
or-
double check that. I don't think we did,
Alex has anything?
other than the sound was low. Yeah, no questions.
And then we'll entertain a motion to go in camera.
Motion to go in camera.
Seconder?
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor signify by saying aye. And my name, motion carried.
Half hour to first pitch.